Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Covey, and I'm the president of First Flight Venture Center, a business incubator focused on high science, high impact companies. First Flight is so proud to be the SBIR Week in the Southeast host for North Carolina, and we hope that you have enjoyed your time so far, but we have much more in store for you. We're so happy to have you all join us, and of course we wish we could actually see you all, but we do have over 160 attendees for this panel, which is great. So before we get to our wonderful sponsors and panelists, I'll kick us off by telling you a little bit about First Flight Venture Center and some of our programs. Okay, next. First Flight at its core is a business incubator focused on high science, high impact companies driven to change the world for good. Many of these science-based companies are in biotechnology and health services, clean tech, agriculture, material sciences, and many others with a scientific and technology foundation. We are a nonprofit 501c3 located in the heart of the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. And next year is a big year for us since it will be our 30th anniversary. In that time, we've helped well over 400 companies succeed. We have about 25,000 square feet of space with 40 offices, 21 labs, and shared equipment available for our startups. We usually have about 30 to 40 companies at any given time, and we are proud of our First Flight companies, which raised over $35 million in grants and $25 million in investments in 2019 alone. Next, please. We have many programs at First Flight. Liftoff is a program where we partner with an esteemed grant writing team, Eva Garland Consulting, who is also our sponsor and a panelist, and you'll have the chance to meet her today. And we help early stage companies obtain non-dilutive funding. We also have been the SBA FAST grant awardee for the past 2 years. And because of that funding, we were able to expand the Liftoff program to underrepresented groups in North Carolina, including ventures in rural areas and minority founded companies. Hangar 6 is our advanced prototyping facility, and we are fortunate to offer not only help with physical prototyping equipment, so we have equipment like laser cutters, wood shops, CNC mills, but we also have talent from our shop manager and volunteers who help entrepreneurs walk through the iterative design process, which is typically an expensive endeavor and not easily accessible to startups. In addition, we are one of 13 drive accelerators helping our companies, which are focused on preventing health security threats, obtain funding for their ventures through BARDA, which is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. Next. Are our slides advancing here? Okay, so we are also offer mentoring through our Navigators program to all of our First Flight companies who can get real world advice from experts in industries and skill sets. So our Navigators volunteer their time to help founders achieve success. We are very grateful to our Navigators. Propeller is a new program that we are launching this fall to help early stage founders, especially through the ideation phase. And this will help test and validate their ideas for commercialization. It will also help founders communicate their value proposition to stakeholders like investors and government agencies. This is now available all virtually online and can be helpful for those in need of self-paced programs to fit busy lives. And last but not least, we have a monthly founder roundtable for our folks to get access to peer mentors and experts to help them make important business decisions to ensure success. If we can be helpful to you or your companies, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us at ffvcnc.org. Next. Now it is my pleasure to announce our wonderful sponsors which made this event possible. Our lead sponsors, Eva Garland Consulting and NC IDEA. Our supporting sponsors, NC State University, Office of Research, Commercialization, and Office of Research and Innovation. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Office of Technology Commercialization, Kickstart Venture Services, and made possible by Duke University Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and Hutchison Law. And first up to introduce herself is Eva Garland of Eva Garland Consulting. Eva, take it away.
Thank you, Krista. Appreciate the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon in this great event highlighting the SBIR program. Our firm is called Eva Garland Consulting. We're located in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I can skip to the next slide here. And our mission at Eva Garland Consulting is advancing science. And the way we do this is we work with scientists and entrepreneurs to help them to identify funding sources, to apply for and secure that funding, and ultimately to manage the funds once they receive it. So our team consists of 30 PhD level grant writing experts who are scientific consultants with a very extensive background and having served on SBIR STTR review panels, having great relationships with the program officers from all 13 of the federal agencies who provide SBIR STTR funding. And many of our scientific consultants are entrepreneurs ourselves. We also have 10 accountants on our team who specialize specifically in grant accounting to help companies once they receive SBIR, STTR, and other government grant funding in all of the compliance regulations and all of the accounting and indirect rate negotiation, audit support, and everything that needs to be done on the back end once you have government funding. To date, we have about 800 clients in all 50 states, as well as on 5 continents, and have secured about $350 million in grant funding for our clients. You can see on the right side some of the various agencies that we've worked with, and very importantly, the SBIR STTR program in the middle, which really focuses on helping early stage entrepreneurs secure that initial funding that they need. So next slide. We are very proud of the partnerships that we have. One of our longest standing partnerships is with First Light Venture Center. And we've been working together for several years on an initiative called the Liftoff Program, which Krista referred to, and which has raised over $15 million in SBIR, STTR funds for North Carolina companies. We have a partnership with the National Institutes of Health, in which we are contracted to provide assistance to 1,000 companies over a 5-year period in helping underrepresented groups to secure SBIR STTR funding. We have received an award from the Small Business Administration, which administers the SBIR program, and with this award, we have been able to fund development of a website called SBIRland.com, which provides resources for entrepreneurs and scientists. And the timing's great right now because you know, if you can't get the help in person, you can go to the website, and it's staffed every day with our scientific consultants who are answering any question you might have about the program or as you're completing your applications. We've published 2 best-selling books that are available on Amazon.com on the SBIR STTR program. And finally, we have an initiative that we've begun with many of the idea states. And these are states that have historically been underrepresented in securing SBIR STTR funding to help entrepreneurs in those regions to be more successful. I did see a question, and yes, these slides will be available after the talk. And so you can actually click on all those links once the slides are released afterwards.
Great.
And next slide. This is just to show you very briefly over the 6 years that we've been working closely with First Light. It's really very exciting to see the progress that North Carolina's made. In 2014, the state was ranked number 16 nationally in securing SBIR STTR funding, and through a concerted initiative of a lot of different groups, including the Liftoff program, we're very excited that that number has gone up quite a bit, almost doubled in 5 years, and that the national ranking of the state has increased to number 11. So next slide. And finally, I just wanted to highlight an initiative that we have at Eva Garland to help investigators who are working on COVID-19 related research to identify all the opportunities that exist. There's 200+ opportunities that are out there right now. There are many billions of dollars available, of course, for those who are working on COVID-19 related projects. And we've kept a database of these opportunities that you can reach through our website. And there's a free subscription where you can just get alerts every time there's new COVID-19 opportunities. So I wanted to highlight that as well. And I think the last slide. And we'll say thank you very much again for letting us be a sponsor for this event. And we look forward to the subsequent panel.
Thank you so much, Eva. Next up, we have Tom Rue from NCIDEA. Take it away, Tom.
Hello, everybody. Krista, thank you. And Bridget, thank you for the invitation to speak very briefly at this auspicious occasion. For those of you who don't know, NC IDEA, we are an independent private foundation. That means that we function primarily as an economic development organization, but do so under the auspice of being a private foundation. So despite having NC in our name, we're not affiliated with the state in any way. We have our own resources that we deploy in furtherance of our mission. Since we were founded in 2005, we have deployed over $11 million in grants to companies and partner organizations, and I'm very happy and proud to count First Flight as one of those ecosystem partners. They were an original grantee in our first ecosystem cycle nearly 4 years ago, where I had the chance to first meet Eva and the great work that she was doing, which is why we were so thrilled to fund the Liftoff program. And then we recently made another grant to them to support some of the great work that Krista is leading in her new tenure in the organization. I don't know what happened to the slides, but I'll just say that our money has helped create many companies that have formed many jobs and raised private equity. Here we go. If you go to the next slide, please. There's the vanity metrics, right? 420 companies. We supported over 2,900 jobs. Those companies have gone on, raised a bunch of money. I should give credit thinking about the speakers today because I know we have our friends from Idea Front Partners as one of the speakers. Lister Delgado and his partner, John Cambier, were very instrumental in helping form NC IDEA back in the day. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that today's moderator is somebody that I have the good fortune of knowing very, very well because she has been serving on our board for several years. I believe she's in her 6th year of service on our board, and that's Karen Levert, who is just an incredible resource here in the Triangle. Most of you already know Karen, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank her publicly for her service to our board and leadership on our board. She was in addition to the many things she's done for the organization, she has been a past board chair. So you're very well represented here. I wish you all luck. This is a great program. This is a great ecosystem partner. And the more we do in this space, we just continue to elevate the notion that North Carolina is in fact the best state in the nation to start and grow companies of high potential. So once again, thank you and congratulations on this great event.
Thank you so much, Tom. We're so grateful to you and for the support of NC IDEA. Really appreciate all of you. So just want to give everyone a heads up that when we are going into presentation mode with the slides, it wipes everybody's slides off the screen. So sorry for the technical difficulties there. So again, thank you, Tom. Next up, we have Wade Fulgram from NC State University. Take it away, Wade.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you, Tom. Also, we've benefited from the programs that NC IDEA has funded over the years. It's helped us launch very successful programs, so we're indebted to both First Flight and NC IDEA. I'm Wade Fulgram. I serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Office of Research Commercialization at NC State. Next slide, please. Our office basically serves as the stewards of all IP created at NC State. And our mission is essentially to comprehensively support the research enterprise, accelerating commercialization of research discoveries, particularly aimed at solving the world's grandest challenges. And next slide, please. We do this with a team of scientists, attorneys, business and creative professionals. And next slide, please. And for the last 9 years, what we've really focused on is our new ventures program, which to date has grown 425% from the last 9 years. Currently, we're ranked #2 in the country for universities without a medical school, only trailing MIT. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of kind of the spectrum of technologies that you'll see coming from NC State. Even though we don't have a human medical school, we still have companies that are around medical devices, human therapeutics, We work in the CRISPR-Cas genomic editing space, and then all the technologies you would expect from an engineering university, like advanced materials and cybersecurity, chaos computing, things like that. So we really cover a wide spectrum of companies. Next, please. This slide is a snapshot of currently what are programs, resources, and partnerships that we've founded, basically to help our investigators at NC State. Everything from proof of concept funding to mentorship programs to our NSF I-Corps Voice of Customer program. And the one that we're most proud of, or the one we're focused on this year in particular, is our SBIR STTR Spark Plug program, which will be in collaboration with First Flight Ventures and Eva Garland Consulting. We're very excited about that. Next slide. We've been fortunate to have our work recognized by some of the leading institutes. The Milken Institute recognized us a couple years ago in a concept commercialization top 25 tech transfer offices in the country, where we are one of the only Mid-Atlantic universities to receive that recognition. Last year, we made the National Academy of Inventors top 100 worldwide universities for granted US utility patents. And then just this June, we were recognized by the George W. Bush Institute in their study on innovation impact from US universities, where we were ranked number 20. Next, please. Final slide, where are we headed? One program that we're very excited about is we just submitted a very large $15 million proposal to the National Science Foundation in coordination with 9 other leading universities from the Mid-Atlantic region under their new hub program. And we're very excited that with the help of these new partners, we're going to be bringing terrific science and startup companies to, again, address the world's biggest problems. And thank you for allowing us to support.
Thank you so much, Wade. Exciting stuff. So next up, we have Mireya McKee from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mireya McKee, and I am the Interim Director for Kickstart Venture Services, which is a department at UNC that sits within the Vice Chancellor of Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Economic Development. Next slide, please. And this Vice Chancellor for Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Economic Development has 2 main offices. There's the Office of Technology Commercialization and the Office of Innovate Carolina. And together we form a really strong group to really drive innovation and entrepreneurship at UNC. The Office of Innovate Carolina has different departments that are all kind of responsible for promoting strategy innovation at the university. Things like innovation and entrepreneurship program funding, our global network, market research and communications. And then the Office of Technology Commercialization itself is responsible for commercializing all the intellectual property and tangible assets owned by the university. So there's a group of commercialization managers, as well as the team that does outreach and IP development, strategic partnerships, and licensing support. And then there's our department at Kickstart Venture Services that really supports the startups that are coming out of UNC intellectual property and research. And our mission is really to create impact through startup companies at UNC. Next slide, please. And Carolina has a long history of being very successful with its startup companies, and it's raised over 2.9 billion and just in annual revenues, over 121 million for startup companies. But when this department was created over 10 years ago, it's been created again with the focus of helping the startups succeed in a very difficult world. UNC has a strong focus on life sciences, and it's very expensive and very time consuming to get these companies to succeed. Yet I'm glad to say here we see some of our success stories, including one of the very first recipients of this program. G1 Therapeutics was one of the first companies to come from our Kickstart program, and so far we're helping them throughout the way, and hopefully this will become some of the biggest companies in North Carolina in the future. And we're working together with a lot of these actors that you've seen here today, First Flight and SBTDC and Eva Garland and NC State and Duke University and others to really create a fantastic ecosystem here in North Carolina to succeed with our fantastic research we have in that triangle. Next slide, please. And at Kickstart, what we're really doing is helping in different ways the startups, from education and workshops, courses and meeting, to really helping them assess, is this a real business opportunity, helping them, like I said, with market analysis, have advisory panels and small grants that we can help them. And since we've had this program for 10 years, we've had, 94 startups that we supported in one way or another, And then we help them launch if it makes sense to incorporate with partners such as Hutch Law and others that we have here, again, working together with our ecosystem locally. We also have our own set of proof of concept KBS awards. We connect them with service providers in the ecosystem, everybody here. We've given over the last 10 years over 2.3 million in internal awards and different sources of funding. And then we have our companies grow, connect them with management. We want them to go on after SBIR and STTR funding. This is why this is such an important workshop for us to participate in. We actually also now have a new program where we work both with Eva Garland as well as with 3 other service providers to provide support to UNC companies in grant writing, and we've seen a high increase in success rates. And we have also wet lab and accelerator space on campus. And ultimately, we want our companies to graduate and succeed out. And again, we've had quite a lot of success in our the investment we've had in, like I said, 2.3 million in funding, have gone on to raise the 72.9 in non-dilutive funding and 789 in equity dilutive funding over the years. So again, we're very proud of our startups, and we hope to continue with the successes and become really the great success stories of the future here today. And everybody attending in the audience, we're here to support you.
Thank you so much, Maria. We really appreciate you. Next, we have Shalini Sankaran with Duke University.
Thank you very much, Krista. As Krista said, I'm Shalini Sankaran. I am Director of Translational Programming at Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship is a cross-Duke initiative, and we support faculty and staff from all the schools and all the departments at Duke who are working at a very early stage on innovations and entrepreneurial ideas. We work hand in hand with the very rich ecosystem, both within Duke and in Research Triangle Park. Duke itself has an Office of Licensing and Ventures that we work with very closely. Duke has had 142 spin-out companies and raised over $5 billion in private and public financing since the inception of the Licensing and Ventures Office. And we've had 9 successful IPOs. So we're very pleased and very proud to be one of the sponsors for this exciting event. I just have 2 minutes, so I thought I would use my time to talk more specifically about what we do at Duke I&E. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we focus on helping faculty and staff at very early stage of their innovation journey. We're collaborators, we're connectors. We host workshops on innovation and entrepreneurship. We have one-on-one coaching, connections, funding, and mentorship. And we administer the Duke Incubation Fund, which awards up to $20,000 in seed funds. And many of our Duke Incubation Fund awardees have since gone on to successfully obtain SBIR, STTR funding, take advantage of many of the wonderful funding opportunities, including NC IDEA grants and Duke Angel Network. Next slide, please. And for any of you all out there who are students or who mentor students, I also wanted to mention that we have a host of programming available for both graduate and undergraduate students that benefit the entire ecosystem. So once again, I just wanted to say to everyone, welcome. Thank you for having us. You're part of a very rich ecosystem of support services who will help you succeed as you launch and grow your new company. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Shalini. And last but certainly not least, we have Dan Fuchs from Hutchison Law. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to help sponsor this week. For those of you who aren't familiar with Hutchison, we are a boutique business law firm based in the Triangle. with offices in Atlanta and some outposts in Virginia Tech and down in Florida. We like to say that Hutchison is where companies and capital meet. So we help companies get incorporated, get funded, get founded, run day-to-day operations from a legal perspective, and then ultimately get acquired or help them go public. We've been in the triangle for well over 20 years, and I'm happy to see that so many of our colleagues and partners from over the years are either speaking or sponsoring today's panel. To give you a sense of what we focus on, we are highly focused on startup companies and spinning technology out of universities. So SBIR and STTR grants are a key component of helping our clients fund their operations. And in any given month, we generally bill around 600 different companies, and that's with 22 attorneys here working at Hutchison. We focus on life sciences and technology, and would be happy to help anyone who has a good idea that they're looking to put some legal structure around, get off the ground and help apply for these SBIR and STTR grants. So as the last one, I won't keep it longer than that because you have a great program here ahead of you, but thanks again for the opportunity to sponsor this event.
Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate you, and big thank you to all of our sponsors. Actually, before I announce our panel and our moderator, I just want to reiterate the fact that we will be recording this, and you all will have access to this after we finish up today, and we will be sharing the slides as well. So you'll have access to everything. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our panel moderator, a wonderful lady, Karen Levert, from venture partner, or she's a venture partner with Pappas Capital. Karen has a long history of further developing early stage technologies from university research labs and launching them into the commercial market space. These commercialization efforts lead to spin-off companies in optoelectronics, medical devices, agriculture, via Southeast Tech and Ventures and Ag Tech and Ventures, which are innovation labs she co-founded. Karen's business experience encompasses both corporate and entrepreneurial worlds with over 25 years of successful leadership experience in executive management, startups, and technology commercialization. Thank you so much for being here today, Karen. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Krista. And I want to also thank the sponsors for making the event possible and for all you do in the community. And also, I want to let you know how excited I am to be moderating this panel today. I know these panelists well, and I know that you're in for a treat with a lot of feedback. So we're going to start off with a test. So I'm somewhat kidding, somewhat not. So we have a poll for you, and we're going to give everyone 1 minute to fill out the information that you have on your screen there. And at the end of 1 minute, we'll stop, and I'm realizing we probably should have like some not applicable in there, but this will give us an opportunity to understand and learn a little bit more about you. Okay, thanks.
Karen, we're actually having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Is that better or worse?
About the same.
So I've been on this computer all day today with
Of
no
course,
problem.
of course.
Worse?
No, I said of course, of course.
Oh.
Technology always happens at the worst time.
Eva and Lister, are you same thing? Can't hear very well?
Actually, now you're sounding a little bit better.
Okay, maybe I'll just speak really loudly. So hopefully we're blocking the poll right now, right? For 1 minute?
Correct.
And so everyone that's in the audience, you can also see the poll results, I believe, right? Okay, I'm going to assume that a minute has passed, and I guess, will those poll results stay someplace where we can see them here? Okay. Just to take a quick look, and hopefully the panelists, you'll be able to do the same. Okay. A lot of friends and family, folks that have received a phase 1, not a phase 2. A lot of people never have applied, so this is a wonderful event for you all. And we have a lot of friends and family from an investing standpoint, and customers in less than 6 months, so that's really good. All right, so just from a housekeeping perspective, as we get started here, we're going to have the panel introduce themselves. So you have Eva Garland, Lister Delgado, Mary Musakia, you'll hear from. And then from there, I've got some questions that I'll ask. We want to make sure we finish on time and also give you all a chance to ask questions. So in your Q&A box here on Zoom, you can put your questions there. Some questions have been answered, I noticed. So if you open that box and see answered, you can look in there for some questions that I think some of the sponsors have already answered. So without any further ado, Eva, how about we have you go first, followed by Mary, and then Lister. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you.
And tell us a little bit about your firms too.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. And I know that I had a chance to talk about Eva Garland Consulting a few minutes ago, so I won't go too far into that. But I first want to say, Karen, it's just such a pleasure to be with you here today. I think we first met about 12 years ago when I was just beginning my ventures into startups, and Karen was already well into the game in terms of understanding how to get early stage technologies push forward using a variety of different funding sources. So it's so exciting to be with you now and to be on this fantastic panel with a diverse group of people, because I really do believe it takes many different types of funding to successfully get technologies commercialized. It's not a one size fits all. So although this event is about SBIR, STTR, it's really critical to be part of the broader ecosystem of securing funding to advance technology development and commercialization. As I alluded to, I started out at a startup 12 years ago or so. I had previously been on the faculty of NC State and was sort of curious what life was like on the other side. And so I joined Agile Sciences and led their research program. Immediately, 2008 hit, and that meant that we had no opportunity for funding because of the market crash from the traditional equity investment sources. And that's when I got very involved in the SBIR STTR program, utilizing it to fund about 15 million or so in research at Agile. During that time, I noticed that while we were, lucky to be successful in securing grant funding, a lot of other companies weren't. And I wanted to sort of fill that gap, fill the void of being able to help companies understand the non-dilutive funding source as a great source of capital for early stage science to get through that initial R&D stage and really position the science and de-risk it to where other sources of funding may start taking over from there, ideally, getting actual customers. And so I've been CEO of Eva Garland for 7 years now, and very excited to have built a team of 50 employees and been able to work with near almost 1,000 companies now and helping them secure non-dilutive funding to help advance their research and development.
Thank you, Eva. Mary?
Hi, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm really enthusiastic about the panel and about the opportunity to talk about angel investing. I'm on the board of directors of RTP Capital, which is an angel network. And that means that all of the members of RTP Capital are accredited investors, and we make individual investment decisions, which is a little bit different than a fund. RTP Capital was formed in 2010 when the original founders sort of recognized that there was a gap or a need, maybe that's a better way to say it, a need for additional early stage funding. And so RTP Capital focuses on seed level and early stage investment opportunities. We are a network that is, there is no specialty of its members. They're from all walks of life, so to speak. likewise, our investments, we are not an angel group that focuses only on medical devices or only on fintech or agriculture. We will look at all early stage and seed as well as early stage investments. We tend to focus mostly in North Carolina, but one of the interesting impacts of COVID is that we are now looking at opportunities that are beyond here because we have easy to see them. But like a lot of investors, you like to have your portfolio a little bit closer to you so you can lay your hands on those early stage founders when the time comes that it's needed to sort of have a personal conversation. I think that we try to focus on having a disciplined screening process and a disciplined due diligence. So that is a lot about RTP Capital. Two seconds about me. As I said, I'm on the board of RTP Capital. I'm also on the board of directors at First Flight Venture Center. I've known everybody on this panel for quite a while now, although Krista Covey I've known only very recently. And my background, I've been everything from general counsel at SAS Institute for a good number of years to doing international business development for a Fortune 500 company. But I found throughout my career, I liked building programs. And that's what drove me when I went onto the board at CED. That's what drove me towards CED and being eventually the chair on that board, which was I liked early stage companies. And with that, I'll leave it and turn it over to Lister.
Great. Thank you, Mary. My name is Lister Delgado. I am one of the managing partners at Idea Fund Partners, a seed and early stage venture capital fund. I am an electrical engineer by training, practice as an engineer for 5 years or so, doing ASIC design, systems engineering, software engineering, and transitioned into the dark side of the investment world about 20 years ago. And I have been doing venture investing and economic development and community development since that time. Idea Fund Partners is a seed and early stage venture capital fund that focuses on investing in overlooked markets. We are generalist investors, and we initially invest in companies somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million, and then look to continue to invest in those companies. Idea Fund Partners has been investing since 2007, and probably I should mention, since NC Idea is a sponsor here, that Idea Fund Partners is a different entity. Idea Fund Partners is very much a for-profit entity that invests in companies that are high growth businesses versus NC Idea, which is a not-for-profit. And thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Very good. So I think the participants, you can tell that we have a wealth of experience on the panel. And if we could, Eva had sent us a Valley of Death slide, and I don't know if we're able to share it or not. Okay. I don't see it there. Well, I'll just talk through it. We can go back to the panel, no problem at all. I wish I could see everyone, because everyone probably knows the answer to Valley of Death. So you remember the graph, and off to the right-hand side, that's where all the riches are. You're commercialized, and before you get there, from a research and development perspective, there's an area where we fall into that, here we go. Good job, Emma. Which is called the Valley of Death. And a lot of times we call it this because it's a place where we have very limited funding, and very limited funding because we're in an area where we haven't completely proven the technology yet. And so when you get to where the VC funding is, where Lister's playing, you're in the early commercialization stages. So what we're hoping on the panel today is to talk you through the Valley of Death a little bit more, so you're resurrected, huh? And learn about how to move through that. And also, a lot of times we don't get funding because we don't really know what angel investors, or we really don't know what the venture folks are expecting of us. So we'll start off with that as the first question. Thanks, Emma. We'll go back to the view of the panel. So if we start with from a funding perspective, Eva, let's start with you on this one. If you had to characterize kind of the best companies that are aligned for success from an SBIR, STTR perspective, can you give us a few examples of that?
Sure. The SBIR STTR program, I think the most important letter in there for SBIR is I for innovation, right? It was a program established in 1983, so it's been around for a long time, focused on advancing innovation in the U.S. And that's been the mission of the program since the beginning. STTR came in 10 years later to focus specifically on university tech transfers. But the innovation aspect is absolutely critical. So it's okay to have high risk in projects that are good fits for SBIRs, but they've got to be highly innovative. And so what the agencies are not looking for is they're not looking for some sort of a minor improvement. They're looking for something that's really groundbreaking. And telling that story is something that we really enjoy doing, because it's science that has the potential to really change the field, change the paradigm, and really take a commercial product in a totally new direction. And that's the type of project that's a good fit for an SBIR. It is important to have a little bit of preliminary work done. You can't just have just an idea, but there are some really great ways to get some initial proof of concept work done to take that technology to the place where it's a good fit for a phase 1 SBIR.
Thank you very much. Mary, when you're answering your question to Enlister, when you start yours, same way, what makes a company really attractive to an angel group? What makes a company really attractive to a venture fund? And then maybe a question came in that we saw, so it may be best to talk about this now too. What's the difference between an angel investor, an early stage investor, and a VC? So maybe when you're answering that question, if you could also touch on, and maybe Lister, when it gets to you, how you're different.
Well, I'll go first then. And I think we talked about, when the group was preparing for this, about 3 categories: team, technology, and market. And Eva's just said technology is the technology innovative work is something that you look for at the SBIR stage. Well, when you're moving up to the angel level, we're going to be looking at, we'll sort of flip that a little bit. Technology is great, but we care more about the team and the market. And so we're going to be looking at attributes associated with those categories. I mean, clearly, if you don't have the technology, if you don't have something that's innovative, or at least something that can move the needle forward, that would make it worth somebody wanting to buy it, i.e. customers, you're going to not be of interest. But that's more of a market analysis. So angels invest very early. So it is unlike SBIRs, because there's no risk at the government end except to us taxpayers. At the angel end, the risk now is that we're stroking our own checks here, one way or the other. And so that becomes very, very important, that you've got a team, or you've got a plan to improve your team, that you have a market, or a plan to go to market, or a plan to very carefully identify the market. So a lot of times at the angel level, you hear product market fit, product market fit. Yeah, you've got a product, yeah, you've got technology, but where's it going to fit? And that's where early stage companies are really looking to find it. So that's, to me, I know Lister will point out where they differ from that, but that's what's happening at the angel level. I'm not investing in your dream technology and your dream innovation. I'm investing to get a return. So
So I think it was well said by Mary and Eva. I think that there are lots of different types of angels. I'll sort of touch on maybe what is perhaps a little different between an angel and a venture capital entity. The difference is really that an angel is investing their own money, and a venture capital fund, typically, or a venture capital investor, typically investing somebody else's money. That's basically the difference. Now, there is a wide range of angels. Angels might invest their money because they want to do something great for the world, or may want to invest their money because they want to make money. Venture funds typically only want to make money. There are some that do want to do good, but the alignment is typically much more with a very capital oriented business. So because of that, I think it's typical that a VC will pay a lot more attention to the go-to-market strategy and the growth potential of the company. I think it is great to have a product. It's important to have a big enough market and a great team, but I would add that the go-to-market strategy, how a business takes its products to market, is really what makes the difference between whether a company tends to get funded or not.
And also, I'll just remind the panelists too, if you have other thoughts, we're going to keep it pretty informal. If you can add on or want to add on, just jump in. So those are, perfect answers, and I hope that cleared up the question that someone had as well. So we talk about funding early stage companies, and let's talk about SBIR. And instead of saying SBIR and STTR, we're just going to say SBIR. STTR, for those of you that may not know, is when a small business partners with a nonprofit, usually in a university, could be an RTI or someone like that. So when I say SBIR, we'll encompass both. So are there certain sectors that are better for SBIR, Eva? And I'm thinking too, as it relates to where we are geographically as compared to Massachusetts or California, can you add to that? And then when she finishes, Mary and Lister, we're curious too, from an investor standpoint, are companies more attractive to you if they've received SBIR funding? Go ahead, Eva.
Sure. Well, I always like to start right away with the downside of SBIRs, which is that it does take a while to get one. And so if you have a product that you need to get to market in 3-6 months, or if you're looking to exit in 6 months, SBIR is not a good choice for you because it's going to take that long to get a grant. Or if you're in a field that's changing so quickly, like software, sometimes by the time your grant's even been reviewed, it's obsolete. So truly the best types of technologies for SBIR grants are going to be those that have a fairly long lead time of at least a year or two of additional R&D that you need to get done. And also technologies that need quite a bit of capital, because I'm talking about millions of capital as opposed to those that need 50, 100K to kind of get that initial product. Because the SBIR program does provide through its phase 1, phase 2, and NIH especially phase 2B, for a single product you can get up to $6 million sometimes, but it's going to take you 4, 5, 6 years. And so those are the technologies that are really best suited to SBIR awards. And even though the DoD is the largest institute in terms of granting SBIR funding, in North Carolina we are seeing the most funding come from NIH, partly because we are a life sciences hub in this area, and I think just historically NIH has been a better fit for a lot of the technologies that have come out of North Carolina. We are certainly looking to increase DoD funding here. That's a huge initiative that we've actually been working with NC State on, as well as First Flight, to try to increase DoD SBIR funding. But historically, NIH Life Sciences has been the area that has benefited the most from SBIR funding in the state. And, you compare it to California, Massachusetts, they're in similar situations. They probably have more technologies that are good fits for DoD and other types of funding. So they have a little bit more diversity in terms of the types of agencies that they target. But I think the same sort of overall guiding principle applies, that if you've got a highly innovative technology, that you've got a couple of years of R&D at least left until you get to a commercial product, and you need capital that's at least a few $100,000 to a few $1 million, that's a really good fit for the SBIR.
To follow up what Eva was saying, and to Karen's question, I think one of the things that is a dilemma is that when you start talking about, so what's attractive to angels, since it's a highest category risk investment other than being your mother, but then you're not looking for a return. So other than I love you and you come for Thanksgiving dinner, I think that the issue for the NIH type companies, the science focused companies, for an angel, highest capital cost, longest runway, largest regulatory hurdles. So those things up front make it a little less desirable for an angel, because one of the things that angels struggle with, at least in this area, in my opinion, is exits. You need a capital churn. And so that's one of the issues where if you're looking at extremely long runways to commercialization, then, and a lot of money, a lot. So you're looking at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more rounds of raising funds. That to me is not necessarily a good angel investment, even if you're coming and you only want to start off with, say, $750,000 or $1 million. That's still, I would look at that as not as attractive. If you look at the fintechs and the other software-based ones, again, less capital intensive for the most part in terms of the development, but they really need to know and have their go-to-market strategy, and then there's always the intellectual property protection side. So those tend to be those that are being funded a little bit more, those that are the IoTs that are in that category. The other thing I would say is that I think one thing that in founders or people looking for angel capital should be thinking about is having that discussion with angels, how you can get a 10x exit is great, but if it's in 20 years, not so great. A 3x exit or a 2x exit in 2 years is a lot better than 10 in 20. So be thinking about how you talk about what your exit potentials are or ways to get angels out sooner. It allows for the capital churn, and it has them looking and thinking, all right, this is a better bet for my return. So I don't know if that helps or if it fully addresses your question, Karen, but those are some thoughts.
Yes, it does. Lister, we'll have you respond. And can you also, Mary was talking about a 2X or a 3X. Can you explain to everyone what that means too?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. In essence, if you think about how an investor is thinking about every company that comes to them, whether they're an angel, whether they're a venture capital fund, they're a black box. It really, in the end, it does not matter what the entrepreneur does. An investor who is looking at financial returns looks at every single company and they look at it as a multiplier box. Money goes into the box and they want 2 or 3 times more money come out of the box within a relatively short period of time. That's what the 2X or the 3X means. It means I put $1 million into a company and I expect that I will get back 3 times that money, $3 million, hopefully within a 5-year period of time. If I did that, I did pretty well. So the notion of IRR is one that takes into account timing, and the notion of X or multiple on the cash, but talks about the total return. Both of them are pretty important. And when it comes to the question itself, whether an SBIR hurts or helps getting funding, I would say that 10 or 15 years ago, perhaps you probably wouldn't admit that you were looking or pursuing SBIR funding if you were going to pursue also venture capital funding. I think culturally that has changed. It's different. But it's also important to keep in mind the point that Mary was making, which is it depends as to whether this helps or not, with whether it slows you down or not. Because of the returns and the importance of returns in a particular amount of time, an investor typically wants their money back within 5 to 10 years. And if an SBIR is going to be an impediment to get funding back within that return, the returns within that time frame, then it doesn't help. Of course, it's non-dilutive funding, so it helps. So I think a lot has to do with whether your SBIR grant or what you're pursuing is very much in line with the core business that you're going to be pursuing and for which you're going to be looking for additional venture funding. I think that's really the key. It will be a pro because it's non-dilutive cash and investors like that, and you can do more, but it's a distraction or a con if it's going to change the timeline and therefore affect the rate of return to that investor.
I want to amplify what Lister just said. When angels look and we see somebody has that they are still going after non-dilutive funding, SBIRs, that's great. But in your due diligence, the first thing you're going to be looking at is what's your time schedule, what's your horizon on this SBIR, and are you making promises to the government as to what you're going to be doing that is not completely in line with your product market fit in your market, because that then slows you down. And so what I would say is, don't think that angels don't pay attention to how many rounds of VCs you're going to, people figure this out. That's what due diligence does, and they begin to have those conversations. So, and Karen, you know this, you live in this world too.
Mm-hmm. So you guys both, Mary and Lister, said the word non-dilutive. So let's unpack that a little bit. So what's like a huge benefit to a founder that's getting an SBIR grant? You guys, Eva, you want to answer that as it relates to dilution?
Sure. So when an investor invests, whether it's venture capital or angel, they are going to assume some equity in your company. And so you're going to have a less of a share in your company when it sells. Whereas with SBIR funding and other types of grants, and also loans fall into this category as well, you are not giving up a piece of equity in your company in order to get that funding. And so it's beneficial to the original owners because you're going to get more of a share when it ultimately has an exit. So that's definitely an advantage. And I thought it was really interesting what Lister said about the culture change, because I have definitely seen that. I mean, yeah. I think that 10 years ago I would talk to venture capitalists and talk about, we've got all this SBIR funding, and it was a negative, really, because I guess there was a sort of a perception that SBIR distracts you, right? And especially if you have SBIRs in different technologies all over the place. I mean, that's the last thing an investor wants to see. They want you to have a very focused, direct path to market on a single product. And so, but what I've seen change, what's kind of funny to me is that, I mean, even in the last couple of weeks, I think we've had, maybe 10 or so inquiries from VCs calling us, asking us to help their portfolio companies get non-dilutive funding, because now there's sort of a perception of, okay, well, if we work synergistically, then non-dilutive can actually, make the portfolio more valuable without having to further dilute or cause the company to have to get additional rounds of financing from equity sources. So I've definitely seen a turnaround in the culture, and I'd say even in the last 5 years.
Very good. Let's talk about success rates. So Andreessen Horowitz, you folks that are attendees will get a slide deck from Eva, talks about less than 1% of the startups are funded by VCs. And actually the number was like 0.05%. So if we start looking at success rate, and Lister, Mary, if you could elaborate on that at all. Is it easy to get money from you as angel and venture folks? And then Eva, we'll have you follow with kind of success rates on the SBIR side.
Now, I'll go first, since you come to angels before you usually go to VC, although you shouldn't necessarily. I would say that success rate on getting funding, I don't have a percentage to give to you. If you had looked at in the time of COVID, TOC, and we saw at RTP Capital, we saw a slowdown of the deal flow. Because again, funding and deal flow go hand in hand. The fewer opportunities you have to look at, you're not going to necessarily put money in just because a deal is there. You only want to put money in worthwhile deals. So, there was a slowdown in the deal flow, but we have been seeing it pick back up, and starting in July, I would say, where we're now looking at multiple companies every week. And so I would say that probably for every 5 companies you look at, the process is first you look at them and say at the screening level. So let me back it up. You have 3 steps for RTP Capital. Step 1, you have to convince somebody to even take you into screening. Step 2, you go through the screening committee that says, we like you enough to send you on to the member committee. And so each one of those is a cut point. or an advancement point, however you want to phrase it. And I would say that maybe 1 out of 10 gets all the way to membership. You see 2 companies a month in membership, you know, which is when you do your, the company does a presentation to say, please give me money. I would say maybe 1, probably in the course of a year, maybe 6 to 8 companies get funded at some level. So I couldn't put it into percentages, but you've already made several cut points to get just in front of the members themselves. Does that help? I wish I could give you more data, but I don't have.
No, that's good. That's good. Lister?
So I may have my numbers a little bit off, but roughly speaking, they're probably okay. So I think that there's about 100 million new startups a year, which I think is a number that astounds me. I know it does. And there's about 1 million of those are tech startups. When you think about, I'm just going to think about from the venture perspective, because I think it's important to think about the fact that this is not necessarily the path that every company follows. SBIR, angel, venture capital, that's not. You know, there's very particular requirements and needs, and there's many other sources of funding. But again, if we're thinking about 1 million new startups, new tech startups a year, just to give you a sense, there's probably 10,000 investments being made in venture capital every year, more or less 10,000. I think last year was 10,500 or so. And there's about 1,000 or 1,500 or so somewhere VCs in the country making investments. So there's probably, out of those 10,000 new startups that get funded, maybe 5,000 are new companies. And there's probably 300,000 angels writing checks, and they probably write about 50,000, make 50,000 investments. So hopefully this gives you a sense. Now, our fund looks at about 2,000 companies a year, and we make 5 investments a year. So that gives you a sense. So probably, if you look at the entirety of the number of tech startups a year, about 1 million, and you look at the number of VCs writing checks, or companies that get started, so that's 10,000. That's about 1 in 200 get venture capital funding, roughly speaking. And that's very much in line with what we do and what we see. Some get a little bit more, some a little bit less. So I think it's in part because not every company who is a tech startup even needs, should be pursuing venture funding. There's a few particular characteristics, but it's pretty difficult to get funding and even to be successful in getting that funding after. So I think the importance, I think, is to identify what kind of company you have and what is the right funding source, and then to prepare yourself to attack and pursue that funding source as best as you can.
Eva?
Well, I have better news from SBIR. It's about 20% overall, 10 to 20% depending on the year overall, in terms of companies, number of grants that are applied for versus number awarded. But there's huge variance. And so you don't necessarily want to take it as I have a 1 in 5 chance of getting funded. It's really not that at all. There's some companies who apply over and over and over and never get an award. And there's others who get the first 10 that they applied for just because they have such a compelling story that's a good fit for the SBIR program. I would also say within the world of SBIR, each agency is so different. And there's 2 different types of SBIR awards. There's grants and there's contracts, and they are treated very differently as well. So NIH and NSF are the 2 largest agencies that give grants. They give that means that they give awards typically to the best projects overall, whether or not it's a fit within kind of a specific technology area within their mission. NSF and NIH have fairly broad interests, whereas Department of Defense, Department of Energy, NASA, they give contracts. And so in these cases, they actually outline technical specs that they need to see in order to award that contract, that SBIR contract. And so if you're not a perfect fit, for one of the agencies that have contracts, then you really don't have any chance at all. And so it's really important to understand that entire landscape and the nuances within that. And I can keep going and going. NIH also has contracts that we can talk about, which is kind of a smaller part of their program. But really understanding your audience, just like, you know, anything. I mean, just you have to understand your customers, you have to understand your audience of investors, and you have to understand the audience of the various agencies who provide SBIR funding in order to really get a good fit. So now if you've done your homework and you've kind of put together a strong strategy for how you're going to match up your technology and your development needs with the best audience, then all of a sudden you've taken your odds and making them much, much better. Because, you know, even looking at sort of the, you know, 1 in 200 chance of getting VC funding, well, probably about 100 to 150 of those who don't get it really, you know, probably weren't a good fit to start with. And so if you kind of can get yourself oriented so that you're you know, putting yourself in the best chance of success, then your odds become actually much better.
Very good. I wish we had like a couple of hours to continue. What I'm going to do is pivot over to some of the questions. You guys have been super answering these earlier questions. So Lister, this one's for you. And the question's about maybe the audience would benefit from hearing from you on how the age of a fund matters to investment decisions.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I don't think usually nobody asks us, how old is your fund or what stage of fund are you in? And that could be the biggest difference for success in talking to a VC. A fund can take a long time to die. So if you think about the fact that a fund gets started and when they get commitments from investing, then they start writing checks. That fund then is going to be alive, even if they're a complete failure from the very beginning in writing checks for 10 years. So a fund that is in year 1, 2, 3, and 4 probably is writing new checks. But right after that, year 4 or 5 of the fund is when they start to get into the harvest period. So unless the fund has raised new funds within a period of 5 years, that fund has no money. No new money to invest. So probably not a great idea to be talking to that investor. They still have a portfolio of companies that they need to manage. And their returns are going to depend on the successful management of those companies. But they may not be able to write a new check unless they raise a new fund. So that's number one. And because of it, you know, so think about it as 5 years for the investment period and 5 years for the harvest period. It is important to talk to the investor at the right moment. It's important to think about the stage that fund invests in. If I am a company that is pre-revenue and I am going to talk to a fund like ours, for example, that will invest in pre-revenue companies, but also will look to diversify the portfolio with some companies with some revenue. Well, I'm going to make my pre-revenue investments towards the beginning of my fund. I am not going to wait for year 4 or 5 to make those investments in pre-revenue companies, because the average exit from first funding to an exit takes 10 years. So I'm going to go early in the life of my fund to those early investments. So it's also important to think about within that range where I am. So that's a good question.
Mm-hmm. So here's another question outside of SBIR. Are there other avenues for funding for very early stage pre-revenue? It sounds like, I mean, both from an angel perspective and also Lister, you mentioned your companies don't have to have revenue to get funding. They may need to have really strong teams and technology or some other traction. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, and it's important to understand the strategy that each fund has. Each fund typically has a strategy, and they usually advertise it and talk about it. It's a sales process. Fundraising, whether you're looking for funding from SBIR or an angel, it's a sales process, and you just got to think about it like a sales process. One of those is to understand who you're going to be talking to and what they're looking to buy or what they're looking to invest in. And in our case, for example, we do invest in pre-revenue companies as well as revenue companies. And you know, we do know that investing in an entrepreneur is a very early entrepreneur is a risky proposition. Companies, there's no such a thing as a perfect company. There's no such a thing as a perfect investment. Of course, I would like to have always a great experienced entrepreneur looking to build an amazing new product in a completely exploding market and have very fast traction. But everything doesn't show up necessarily like that. And so there's usually holes. There's things that are incomplete. A team might not be complete necessarily, or the market opportunity might not be perfect. So the more complete you are, the more differentiated you are, the more of a moat that you can create, the more likely that you're going to get an investor, more investors, and an investor to invest in you before the idea is necessarily in the revenue. And as well as it depends also on the nature of the industry and the market conditions. But that's an important consideration as to whether an investor will put money in a company before there's revenue, or they have to wait for those revenue proof points to show the evidence that there's a good investment here.
Mary, would you add more to that?
Yeah, I think I go back to the 3 pillars that we talked about, and you know, the team, the technology, and the market, and these are on sliding scales. I mean, if you're a serial entrepreneur that has hit it out of the park every time, then you're going to get big points for that. And so they may slide a little bit on the market knowing that you'll pull this over. So those things, RTP Capital will invest and has invested in companies that are pre-revenue. But again, how you equate or put together whether or not you're going to make that investment, you know, depends. You look at qualities. If I'm looking at a team, I'm going to look at qualities. I always like this one Babe Ruth quote, you know, that that it's hard to beat somebody that refuses to give up. Well, that's you know, and if that is a serial entrepreneur that never gives up, and if that is somebody that is, you know, really going to be coachable, even if they're not a serial entrepreneur, and you know they're not going to give up, that says a lot as a team. So I think you begin to look at these various things as you're putting it together. So I agree with Lister. It's not, you know, one size fits all in terms of investors, and it's not one size fits all with companies that you may choose to invest in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Eva, you mentioned that you should have some form of proof of concept in preparation for submitting a phase 1. Can you talk a little bit more about your expectations for this? And are those expectations typically the same across the agencies?
Yeah, great question. And this really follows well from, you know, what Mary and Lister had been speaking about in terms of, you know, finding that right fit and how do you get yourself into, when you keep trying and you're not giving up, but what are you doing during that period of time? And one of my favorite stories, we had a company come to us and they had developed a novel polymer, and it was great. It had properties that no other polymer had. It was very exciting, but they didn't have a product. They just had a technology. And so typically in that case, we advise the firm, we say, well, this is wonderful, but you've got to come up with some sort of a product in order to be a good fit for SBIRs and to be able to be a good fit for any additional capital that's going to support commercialization. You need a product. And typically we'll say that, and the company will go away and we'll never see them again. But this company happened to listen and went to an incubator. They were located in New Jersey, but an incubator very much like First Flight Venture Center. And I'm sure First Flight has stories of companies like this all the time, where they're really trying to define, okay, I've got a technology, what is the best fit for that technology? And that company spoke to potential end users and got a sense of what the specs would need to be for this polymer to fit a particular commercial product, and came back to us a year later and said, we have this preliminary data now that we got fairly low cost that shows that this polymer can fit the specs of a commercial product, and we have a customer lined up. And we said, wow, you know, you did everything you were supposed to. And they didn't didn't give up and they kept trying. And I think we've gotten them 2 SBIRs in the last 6 months, and they're well on their way. And they've got their, you know, they're talking deals with their customers, licensing deals, and it was just a very exciting story. So, you know, you need some sort of proof of concept that is going to tie in with commercial specs. I think that's the best way that I can kind of define that. You have to show that you've got a viable commercial product. You've got to show that you've got a viable customer. Each agency might be slightly different in exactly what they're looking for, but big picture, that's what you need in order to be a good fit for an SBIR. And there's a lot of ways that you can get there. If you aren't there today, the NC IDEA is a great place, and Tom Roos spoke earlier. You know, they have grants, $10,000 small amounts, but it can be just enough to get you that data that then gets you that next level of 150K and then $1 million, and now, you know, you're really kind of on the road to success.
Thank you. Well, this is the worst part of my job. We're going to have to wrap up. So there were other questions in the Q&A, and Krista, maybe we can answer those via email. We can get those back out, the ones that are pending. There was one on crowdsourcing funding that would be kind of good to answer, and someone making a pivot with their company. So, but they're manageable. You guys, panelists, did an awesome job. You made my job easy. And we really appreciate all the participants here. And I'll turn it back over to Krista.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. You have really great questions too. And we really appreciate your time and talents and sharing your wisdom with this group. So I know the audience really appreciated you all as well. Just wanted to say a big thank you again to our fantastic sponsors, NC IDEA, Eva Garland Consulting, North Carolina State University, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Duke University, and Hutchinson Law. Thank you all so much for making this possible. I really appreciate, again, the attendees that we had today, about 170. We have worked really hard to make sure that this event has a positive impact on your business. And, you know, again, if we can be helpful to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. One additional really cool announcement: on September 4th, the North Carolina General Assembly and Governor agreed to appropriate $1.5 million to the 1NC Small Business Fund for fiscal year 2021. And the eligibility and reporting requirements under the 1NC Small Business Program can be found on the North Carolina Department of Commerce website, and we will include that on our slides to follow. So again, if you want to learn more about First Flight and if we can help, please go to ffbcnc.org. And just yet again, just want to remind you all that we have recorded this session, and we will be sending the links to this session with all of our attendees, and we will include our PowerPoint slides, sponsor info, and panelist contact list as well. Thank you again to all who participated. We hope you enjoyed tomorrow's program and have a very productive one-on-one meetings with the program managers. Onward and upward. Thank you all so much.